Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Arizona Dbacks podcast, Arizona's #1 baseball and beverage related podcast, where today I have finally summoned up the courage, pulled myself out of bed and out of my depressive episode to do the episode of the podcast that you guys have all been dreading. This is, of course, the Dbacks World Series post-mortem edition of the podcast. I honestly can't be asked to think of a funny pun for this particular episode because it's going to be a painful one to record and relive all of these awful moments that the Dbacks have put themselves through in the 2023 World Series against the Texas Rangers. But that's the job. We got to do it. And since I'm still out in Phoenix, I've got a nice cold cup of Arizona iced tea to go with me and help me keep my temper as we go through everything. And fun fact, I'm actually recording this on Arizona Veterans Day and Veterans Day around the United States. So happy Veterans Day to those of you who are in the US and celebrate, and happy Remembrance Sunday to all of my people back in the UK who will be celebrating that tomorrow from the day I record this. But, let's get right into the discussions. Arizona's first World Series appearance since obviously it did not go quite the same way as it has done the last few times the Dbacks have been in the postseason. So today we're going to go through some of the key moments. Let's start, as all things must, with Game 1. And the first thing I'd like to talk about in Game 1 was kind of the mentality of the Dbacks. The end result saw us losing it to an Adolis Garcia walk-off home run, and that's a big blow going through the 11th inning. You get to the 9th, Paul Sewell blows it, and we have to just kind of go to our bullpen arms, whoever's really up there, and we slip it up. But this was coming off of the fact that we had been leading 5-3 in the bottom of the 9th inning, and that's where our first slip up happens, and it all goes kind of belly up from there. And that was a Corey Seager 2-run homer in the 9th inning off of Miguel Castro. So the key thing I just want to point out is you can't give people like that the chance, You got to have the mentality, if you're Miguel Castro, to go up there and say, I'm not going to give you something to hit. I'm not going to put it just kind of a cookie cutter fastball right down the middle for Corey Seager to go and hit, because he'll go and he'll hit it out the park, and he very nearly did. So it was a big driven home run to right field that did that, and then Adolis Garcia comes up in the 11th and does that. But it was kind of an underlying issue with the Dbacks in Game 1. Like, we got ourselves out and ahead, but we didn't really do anything with the bats after the 5th inning in Game 1. And everyone's saying, well, this is when your bats should be starting to get hot. That's when the most errors happen. That's when you drive in the most runs. That's when you win games. And we didn't do that. We didn't register an RBI after the 5th. We didn't register a useful hit until the 5th. And we didn't go from there. We didn't build on the fact that we had got ourselves out into a lead. We kind of decided, we'll sit on our laurels. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's the Texas Rangers. Yeah, it's the goddamn Texas Rangers who have gone on to prove themselves the best team in baseball this year. We gave them the chance to do it, and they blew us away. Like, they may focus on playing that big, slugging baseball, which is completely different to the way the Dbacks have played this year. We like running, we like RBIs, but we haven't had the confidence to play baseball our way in the postseason. We've played kind of stereotypical postseason baseball, relying on guys like Christian Walker and pretending they can always slug to get us out of a jam, and it's just not happened. If you're going to win games of baseball, you need to do it playing baseball the way that we know we're good at playing. And that's what we did in Game 2. It was kind of just the Merrill Kelly show. In Game 2, he struck out 9 batters in 7 innings. You don't really need to break down the analysis there. In Game 2, we kind of blew them away, and everyone thought, oh, yeah, we're back to normal. Our heads are where they should be at with this, and, that's exactly what happened. But you can't just say, oh, we got one game and that's enough, that's respectable, when you're in a situation where you've tied the series up. You're coming back to Arizona. You should have some kind of home field advantage. It's the first time in years that Chase Field has had something to cheer on, had something to support, and you just expect the home field advantage to do the job for you. And that's the key thing that we had in Game 3. It was just a case of not taking chances and not capitalizing on those chances. Game 3, kind of, there's two things that I would like to point out as the key moments. The fact that the Rangers lost Max Scherzer early, and then they had to bring in Gray as their pitcher, who was supposed to be starting Game 4 for them, and instead he kind of played that through the middle of the game in Game 3. And and this was up against Brandon Pfaadt. And Brandon Pfaadt, he's a new guy still. We can't always trust him to deliver, despite how good he looked against the Phillies. We left pretty much our entire team on base that game. I was live tweeting the game from my bed in the middle of the night in England, and we kept leaving people on base. It was infuriating. And then you start making silly decisions, like you have Gabby Moreno sack bunt to try and get Christian Walker around, and that ultimately ended up getting a set of easy outs, and it was a stupid out to make. Just let Gabby Moreno hit, let him do something. And I'm not entirely sure why Lovello told him to go out there and sack bunt when we had a man on second to move a man from second to third. You let Gabby Moreno hit, he'll more often than not probably get you that double to bat in a run. But we could not drive in a run in Game 3. It was absurd the number of men we left on base. Kind of 3 innings in, I tweeted, stop leaving people on base. 4 innings in, really stop leaving people on base. And it got ridiculous. We couldn't have put anybody else on base. Like, I'm pretty sure we could have made trades for some of the best hitters in baseball, and we'd have still somehow managed to leave them all on base one way or another. And the fact that we lost that game, despite the fact that the Rangers lost Max Scherzer early, like losing the starting pitcher should have been such a blow to them, and we should have really made them feel the pressure in that moment, and it just didn't do it. It was impossible. And then you get the kind of the arm and shoulder injury for Adolis Garcia, who's been their other talisman, the guy who walked off game run, and they lose their big hitting right fielder. You gotta go and get the game from them then. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's all at home. They've lost 2 big players. The win will come to us. You have to go and get it. This is as big as baseball gets. You're in the World Series. You can't just hope that they'll give it to you, because this is the Texas Rangers team, who are pretty well stacked when it comes to kind of backup people, and we just let them do it. And then Game 4, I'm furious about Game 4, because Game 4 we said, oh yeah, it'll be a bullpen day, it'll be fine. Our bullpen has delivered against the Phillies when it's come in and done a job, like Andrew Solfrank, Kevin Ginkel, all impressive guys. But then when you have to think about how you're going to use them through 9 innings instead of 1 or 2, and then Ginkel does the 8th, and then Paul Sewald closes the 9th. That's been our rhythm, and instead we say, okay, we'll just throw people out kind of at random and see what happens for the bullpen. And I don't want to particularly pile on one player. I don't think that'd be useful. I think it would be rather unfair of me to advocate for everybody piling onto one guy, but it's hard not to single out Miguel Castro from Game 4. Here's a person who doesn't particularly inspire confidence. He comes in and you just kind of, oh, really? They're the one we're starting with? Why does our bullpen not face the same kind of scrutiny as a starting pitcher would? Probably just as important when you consider, in the grand scheme of things, a game of baseball. We have good bullpen guys. We have the likes of Joe Manaply, let's not forget, he was an all-star last year. And Solfrank and Ginkel have been pretty reliable all year, but then you start to look at people like Ryan Nelson, you start to think of Kyle Henry, Miguel Castro. what's going on here? Why is there this mental fragility that's in our bullpen when the first time they get called upon to have a really significant moment against kind of half a Texas Rangers lineup, they're missing the talismanic Adolis Garcia, and we're still scared to pitch to them? You could be lobbing them balls. You could be throwing batting practice fastballs, and that's what happened. And that's what we did. And I don't think that's all mental fragility. I think that's a lack of good decision making, and that's not something you can always teach or correct with your trades and your signings and working on it in preseason and in training sessions. If a pitcher isn't going to make the right decisions, the pitcher should not be playing in the major leagues. And I'm not quite sure why Miguel Castro is the guy we turn to in that situation. And I think realistically we need to be looking at acquiring at least a fourth starting pitcher so that we can avoid just leaving our bullpen to sort out a whole game for us. We have to be going for a fourth starting pitcher of some sort, or bringing somebody up who can be a fourth starting pitcher from the prospects here. But then kind of game 5, it's hard to dissect game 5. Like everyone knows that, okay, the Rangers can go and win it in game 5, and for the start of it, we looked like we probably weren't going to let them do that. Gallen pitched tremendously. The milkman delivered, but he didn't really get any support from the rest of the lineup. Like, the age-old adage goes that you don't say no-hitter on the commentary or on social media or anything during a potential no-hitter. Gallen was throwing a no-hitter into the 7th, and the moment somebody tweeted over on X or Twitter, I think X sounds stupid, but anyway, the moment somebody tweeted that, Gallen gives it up, gives away his first hit, and it all kind of falls apart from there. It gets pulled out, and the bullpen crumbles again. It was somewhat fitting that the MVP of the whole World Series, Corey Seager, was the one to kind of win the game and win the World Series for Texas. He's an incredible player, and I'm not going to take anything away from the Texas Rangers. They've had a great year and have played really well, but once again, our bullpen guys have not been able to stand up to some good hitters, and I don't quite understand how we've gone from Solfrank, Ginkel, and Paul Sewald absolutely being able to blow away Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryson Stott, Nick Castellanos, JT Realmuto in the NLCS, and yet none of that confidence, none of that belief in themselves seems to translate into the World Series pitching. I'm not quite sure how we've gotten to that point. And really, it's the same issue. It's this mental fragility, or this mental unawareness of ourselves and actually how talented some of these players in the Diamondbacks organization are. Like, we may be a team that lost 100 and something games 2 years ago. So were the Rangers. And they've come from the same position of us. They've built a good lineup around some solid veterans and some solid young talent, the exact same way we have. Like, Josh Jung is a terrific player, and it's hard to draw comparisons between talented players like that. But they've traded a much similar path to the Diamondbacks, and yet they're the ones who've come away having won the Fall Classic, and we're the ones who are left thinking, well, I guess it's time to record the post-mortem podcast. I'm sitting here looking at this saying there shouldn't have been as big a difference as it seemed like there was. And I'm not going to address the whole feedback about the World Series, this thing of having such a small fan base, small television viewership this year. I mentioned it in the previous podcast. If the big teams deserved to be in the World Series this year, they would have been in the World Series this year. But the Dbacks and the Rangers, it looked miles apart. Miles and miles apart. Like, the two games where the Dbacks looked like they may have had a real shot are the games, and I'd say maybe 3 games, but two games specifically. It was game 2 and game 5. Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen pitching respectively, and Gallen pitched an okay game in game 1 as well. But these are our elite guys, and they did okay, and yet somehow we forgot how to bat, we forgot how to run, and we've not really been a slugging team all year. We're not that kind of thing. We're not playing 2018, 2019 baseball where it's slug, 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 home run, triple, or nothing. We don't play that way. This is a team that's got the likes of Geraldo Perdomo and Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte. These are guys who hit well, but try and hit consistently, get on base, scare pitchers with your running, and get to positions where ordinary quote unquote players don't get to. And they're young, they're exciting, they're dynamic, and some people don't really know what to expect out of how they play. But pretty much the entire World Series, we didn't quite know how to expect, and we didn't know how some players like Corbin Carroll would react. This is their first taste of kind of World Series baseball, postseason baseball. It's the same for Gabby Moreno. But then you got to expect some more out of the main guys. You got to expect more out of Christian Walker. I was so disappointed to see him not getting it, and very much deserved his standing ovations for his Golden Glove and everything else. Standing ovation from Christian Walker, very much deserved for the servant to the team that he has been, and he's had a pretty good year. But you can't say, oh, he's had a great year, so we can excuse him having a poor series. You can't excuse a poor series in the World Series. If you're paying these guys big bucks, they need to be delivering big bucks when they get into the World Series. It's as good as baseball gets, and that didn't happen. That just quite simply did not happen, which is tremendously disappointing when you think about how long it might be for the Dbacks to reach the postseason again. There's, I'm sure, stats floating around of the odds of the Dbacks reaching postseason baseball again this year, but I don't like the chances next year, and I'll be previewing kind of the off season with all the trade rumors, and then kind of doing a preseason preview podcast at some point. But they didn't deliver this year, and I think they were afraid that they wouldn't deliver this year and got into their own heads about it, because I think some players were very much aware that they would not be at the D-backs next year. The likes of Lourdes Gurriel Jr. and Evan Longoria were not quite the spectacularly good batters we've seen from them throughout 2023. And with Gurriel, I think he wants to stay and the D-backs want him to stay, but it's a case of working out the finances there. But Longoria, there very much was this sense of this was their last chance to win a ring, and they were aware of that. The crowd was obviously very much aware of that, and this is a tremendously talented baseball player, but they all knew what was at stake, and they crumbled under that pressure. And when you're playing baseball to the kind of level that we're facing with the Texas Rangers, all of their guys seem to believe that they could come up to the plate and either force one of our pitchers into a mistake, or they could come up to the plate and get something, trusting that if they could get on first or second, the next guy behind them in the lineup would bat them in for a run. And that confidence and that domination of a game and a series is not something the D-backs had. And while our strength is as an underdog, if you're an underdog, you need to go down fighting. You got to be scrappy. You got to not play dirty, but you got to use all the tricks in your playbook. And when you start trying to play like other people and comparing yourselves to other people as an underdog, it's not going to be helpful. You're taking away your biggest strength, is your ability to be unpredictable, your ability to do the thing that you know you're good at, and you got to make the other team deal with whatever it is you're doing. And everyone loves a scrappy underdog, but when the viewership numbers are as low as they were for this World Series, and you know that less people are watching because they've pretty much written off either team and they don't really care, it's not a case that you have nothing to lose, because in this case what you have to lose is as a World Series that, while it wasn't really ever yours to lose to begin with, you still have to go and win the games. And the D-backs didn't look like they wanted to go and win the games. They looked like they were there and a bit in awe of the occasion. And when they did get going, it was spectacular, but it was only for one game. I don't think that game 2 was really a benchmarker at all for the way that the D-backs wanted to play baseball. They got, I think, incredibly lucky in game 2, being able to score 11 runs. That was great, but I don't think it was because we were particularly excellent on that night. Game 2 was the kind of the Merrill Kelly show. Merrill Kelly is the one who made the impact on that Texas Rangers lineup, and they started making defensive mistakes, and they started thinking, oh no, these D-backs are actually coming after us. And we went after them, and we went for the jugular, and we took it. But it's not because we were spectacularly good at hitting that day. We were just not as bad as we were for the rest of the series. But, I think we've reached the time in the podcast where we actually can look at some of the positives, say, hey, it wasn't all doom and gloom. And looking at how we won games was great, but you have to look at what we're going to take from the fact that we have just lost a World Series. What are the team going to learn from? And I don't think it's a learning point. We already knew Ketel Marte was, if not our best, but one of the best players in our lineup. And that 20-game postseason streak is a record that I'm not sure will be broken for a little while, solely considering the players that did fail to hit in this World Series because they weren't in it. Their teams weren't in it. Like, the Yankees weren't in the postseason at all this year. So you can't look at any of their guys to say, okay, yeah, they'll extend their postseason hitting streak. 20 games is a tremendously impressive record, and we have to be really proud of Ketel for reaching that. But then you have to look at the rest of the team to play that same way. And every time Ketel got on base, every time Ketel got a hit, he was kind of pointing to himself, pointing at his chest, saying, yeah, I'm the guy. We didn't have another guy in this postseason. Ketel Marte looked like he wanted to drag that team kicking and screaming to a ring. And it took the D-backs way longer than it should have to realize that was an example that they had to try and live up to. And I think they really overthought the way that they were batting. And I've already said I don't want to single anybody out, but Christian Walker looked like he could stand there and take fastballs and not swing at anything for the first 3 games of the series. And then the next 2, he swung at everything regardless of whether or not it was remotely hittable or not, and made almost no significant contact. I'm not quite clear on my stats, but I don't remember him registering a significant hit until Game 5, and even then, it didn't particularly make much of a difference. And the likes of Evan Longoria, I want to try and give him a pass, because I don't think he was overawed by the occasion, but I think he was just in his own head about, I'm Evan Longoria, right? I should have a World Series ring. I don't think he's going to get another chance quite like this one in his career now. Given the fact that he's a free agent as of a couple of days ago, I'm not sure a team that's got a particularly huge shot at making the World Series is going to give him the kind of contract and money and reverence that he probably should have when you're considering a veteran of his magnitude. But when Emmanuel Rivera comes in and he's hitting better than Longoria at third base, you think, well, that probably means they weren't quite good enough if that's the bar that Longoria is setting, and Rivera is seemingly playing better than them as a pinch hitter. I don't think Rivera is a bad player by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're signing Evan Longoria, you expect them to be better than Manny Rivera. And it was hard to draw a contrast between the two for most of the season. Longoria had a couple fantastic defensive plays, but their hitting hasn't been spectacular. It's been pretty standard. And pretty standard is not going to cut it when you think about the level of baseball that you're playing at. You're playing baseball in November. I get that's not something that everyone is always used to doing, but you got to go out there and just play your game. And we didn't play our game, and Longoria didn't play his best game, and Christian Walker didn't slug the way we expect him to. He's our power guy. Like Lourdes Gurriel Jr.'s got power in him, and so does Gabby Moreno. That ability to just really drive a ball. But Christian Walker is our main power threat, and he's coming up fourth in the lineup, third or fourth in the rotation, and he's not doing much. He's not slugging. He's not smacking. He's not slapping. He's just either watching three fastballs and taking them straight down the middle and not swinging at them when he gets a good one, or he's swinging at a slider that's 4 or 5 inches outside the strike zone. And I think Max Scherzer specifically had Christian Walker absolutely nailed in terms of making him and tricking him into swinging into these things, drawing those swings. And Christian Walker at this point should know exactly what Max Scherzer is going to throw and when. This is a former Diamondback who's got such a publicized record of how he throws, and we're just letting him throw what he wants. And I don't think a professional like that's going to be toying with anybody while playing a big series baseball game. But we didn't make Max Scherzer think twice about what he was throwing even before he came out the game. And then when you compare the performances of kind of the closing pitches and the bullpens, it was such a different experience. Like, we throw in Miguel Castro to throw fastballs, whereas the Rangers can throw in Aroldis Garcia, who can throw 100, 101, 102, and got up to 104 on a couple of pitches. And everyone knows that's the Aroldis Chapman experience, right? He's going to do that, and you just got to do what you can. And especially in Game 3 and Game 5, the likes of Corbin Carroll struggled to do anything with that. It's a hard pitch to hit, but you got to try something. But we just let him blow us away. And then Leclerc coming in as a closer, that's an elite closer. And you compare him and the way he's played to the way Paul Sewald seemed to completely lose track of what was happening around him in the game. And Paul Sewald got found out pretty quickly and got wrung out of the lineup pretty quickly. And Leclerc just looked perfectly suited to playing World Series baseball. The moment didn't faze him. He threw what he was coming there to throw, and it worked, and it came off. And I like Paul Sewald. I think the fact that we've got a running meme with Paul Sewald, he seems to get the importance of who he is and why he's here. And he has the right attitude. And after he came in, he got absolutely destroyed. When he has made mistakes, he owned up to it. But owning up to it isn't going to rewind time, bring the moment back, and let you throw those pitches again. You're responsible for having thrown those pitches, and that shook his mentality quite a lot. There's a difference between your mentality in an interview and then your mentality when, after you've been blown away the way that he was at some points during the postseason, you come back up to the mound the next time. That's a separate mindset. You need to be able to shut those thoughts out. Especially if you're a veteran and you've pitched so many games in your career as a closer and a specialist closer, an elite closer that was brought into the Diamondbacks organization to do this, and then you don't do it. You let things get into your head, and you give somebody like Adolis Garcia or Corey Seager something to hit. They're gonna hit it, and they're gonna hit it hard, and you will pay the price for that. And ultimately, that's the resounding note that I think a lot of fans have taken from this postseason for the Diamondbacks is we gave the Texas Rangers something to work with, and they worked with it. We made the mistakes. They let us make the mistakes, and they punished us for it. But that's baseball sometimes. I guess I'm not going to be a poor loser about it. I'm still in a pretty big funk about it, but that's baseball. You gotta roll with the punches, and we got punched pretty hard. That the trick will be taking that positivity and rebuilding and having a good season next season. And I think that's a pretty good spot to end it. So once again, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching or listening.
Thank you very much for listening. This has been the Arizona Dbacks podcast with me, your host Benji. You can find my socials at GB Diamondback over on Twitter/X. And you can find the podcast on all major podcast platforms and over on Twitter/X at Dbacks Podcast. Thank you much for listening, and I'll see you next time.